It always starts with what feels like love. You're drawn to her presence, her grace, her laughter, the magnetic way she makes you feel understood. She notices the parts of you that most others overlook, and that attention feels electric. So you respond by giving more. More of your time, more of your attention, more of yourself. At first, it seems innocent. Wearing a shirt she likes, softening the tone of your voice, holding back a strong opinion to avoid conflict. But those small compromises start stacking until you look around one day and realize you're not the man you were. You're a curated version of yourself, tailored for her approval. Carl Jung warned us of this precise danger. It begins the moment we confuse our inner projection, the anima, with a real woman. The anima isn't her. It's our internal, often unconscious image of the perfect woman. And when we project that image onto someone real, we stop seeing her as she is and start seeing her as the embodiment of our needs. We worship the illusion, not the person. And that illusion demands sacrifice, your authenticity, your strength, your soul. Before we go further, comment down below from where you're watching this and subscribe. If you've ever looked in the mirror and realized you weren't living your life anymore, just performing in someone else's. This isn't about blame. It's about blindness. When you abandon your individuality in the name of connection, you're not earning love. You're bartering with your identity. And that deal never ends well. The very qualities that once drew her in, your independence, your purpose, your raw presence, start to disappear. And paradoxically, as you try harder to please her, she begins to pull away. Not out of cruelty, but because the man standing in front of her is no longer magnetic. He's malleable, passive, hollow. Jung called this phenomenon a psychic death. Not a dramatic collapse, but a quiet disintegration of your inner life. Your choices aren't your own anymore. Your boundaries dissolve. Your thoughts filter through a constant need for her validation. You become emotionally dependent without even noticing, thinking you're doing the right thing by loving fully. But true love doesn't ask you to shrink. It asks you to stand firm in who you are. And here's the harsh truth. The more you contort yourself to keep her, the more you ensure that she loses respect for you. She didn't fall for a man who would morph at her command. She was drawn to the fire, the conviction, the self-possession. Once those are gone, so is the attraction. She may stay out of habit, guilt, or convenience, but not admiration. And admiration is the foundation of desire. So this isn't just about her. It's about you reclaiming your center. It's about noticing the moment you stop acting from inner truth and start reacting from fear. The longer you ignore it, the deeper you sink into the performance. And every time you silence your instincts to maintain peace, you lose a piece of your own voice. This is the first fracture. And if you don't catch it now, the identity you sacrificed for will soon become a cage you can't break out of. You think you're choosing love. You think you're choosing her. But what you're really choosing is self-erasure, dressed up as devotion. When you reshape your opinions, silence your instincts, or bury your values just to avoid conflict or gain her approval, you're not being loving. You're abandoning yourself. Jung knew that real connection begins only when two whole individuals meet, not when one dissolves into the other. But we're taught, especially as men, that love is proven by sacrifice. That if you give enough, tolerate enough, compromise enough, it'll all work out. So you give until there's nothing left. You become a mirror, reflecting what she wants to see. And still, it's not enough. That's the trap. You think changing will make her stay. But what really happens is that she starts to sense you're no longer anchored in anything. You've traded your spine for compliance, your edge for harmony. And that kind of man becomes invisible. Not because he's soft, but because he's lost. There's a deep irony in this. The more you conform to her image, the more she'll subconsciously test you, push your boundaries, question your choices, provoke a reaction. Not because she wants to destroy you, but because she wants to feel the presence of a man who can't be moved by fear. She wants to see if you're still there, if your core remains unshaken. And when she doesn't find it, the emotional distance grows. So what's the real issue? It's not her. It's the part of you that believes being loved requires becoming something else. It's the boy inside you who still thinks approval equals security. But Jung would say, of her, if the self isn't rooted in authenticity, then every relationship you form will be a performance, an endless theater where you play the lead role in a story that was never yours. This is why men wake up after years of a relationship and don't recognize themselves. It's not sudden. It's the weight of every small betrayal of self, every ignored instinct, every yes that should have been a no. And by the time you see it, the cost isn't just emotional, it's spiritual. You've lost connection to the only thing that could have ever made love real, your truth. You're not supposed to become everything for her. You're supposed to become fully you and let her choose whether she can meet you there. That's where real love begins, not in sacrifice, but in sovereignty. Changing everything for her doesn't just distort your priorities, it fractures your identity. When a man starts to abandon his vision, his discipline, his habits, his routines, not because he evolved, but because he's molding himself into her ideal, he doesn't become more loved. He becomes more replaceable, and ironically, less respected. Because the moment you stop leading your life, you start orbiting hers. Carl Jung believed that every individual must confront the anima, the feminine aspect within the male psyche, not project it onto another. But most men do the opposite. They don't realize they've projected their deepest ideals of feminine beauty, nurturing, and emotional resonance onto one person, and now they chase her approval like a lost child. They think they're building a future together. In reality, they're dissolving into her image. And what does that lead to? Resentment. Quiet, slow resentment that builds over time. Because the man who bends will eventually break. And when he does, he won't recognize himself in the mirror. He won't know where his wants end and hers begin. And neither will she. Because what seemed like love was really a loss of polarity, a collapse of masculine presence. You think making her happy is the key. But what if your happiness was the magnet that attracted her in the first place? You're trying to preserve a relationship by becoming less of yourself, when what you need is to become more of who you are. More grounded, more unapologetic, more alive. Women don't fall for men who compromise everything. They fall for men who know exactly what they won't compromise, no matter who's standing in front of them. When a man begins to abandon his identity for the comfort of someone else's desires, something subtle but irreversible begins to shift inside him. The voice that used to guide him, his instinct, his gut, his vision, starts to go quiet. It doesn't vanish all at once. It fades slowly, replaced by the hum of external expectations, daily compromises, and quiet concessions. She wants a softer version of you, and you oblige. She's uncomfortable with your drive, your solitude, your ambition, and so you tame it, piece by piece. But here's what no one tells you. The man who cuts himself down to fit someone else's frame is no longer a man. He becomes a shadow of himself. Carl Jung warned of this. He saw the dangers of living through the persona, our public mask, the version of ourselves shaped to please others. When a man sacrifices his authentic self in the name of love, comfort, or validation, he doesn't just lose direction, he loses soul. This isn't about masculinity in the cliché sense. It's about psychological sovereignty. When you stop choosing, when you stop confronting, when you stop creating, you've already surrendered. And the tragic irony? The very parts of you that she was drawn to in the beginning, your edge, your confidence, your intensity, those are the exact traits she'll eventually resent you for losing. She'll say you've changed. She'll say she misses who you were. But she won't realize, or maybe she will, that she was part of the reason he disappeared. The question is, will you let him stay gone? When a man gives up his direction to please someone else, he doesn't just lose ground, he loses his sense of internal gravity. Carl Jung understood this well. When a man abandons his path to meet the expectations of another, especially in a romantic relationship, he begins to fragment, slowly, quietly, irreversibly. In many relationships, there's an unspoken expectation that the man should bend, should adjust, should soften. And at first, it feels harmless. You compromise once, then again. You tell yourself it's love, that you're being mature, that partnership is about sacrifice. But somewhere between her needs and your silence, your sense of purpose dissolves. You become agreeable, flexible, less threatening, and eventually, less of yourself. This isn't about refusing to grow or learn from someone else. It's about what Jung called the loss of individuation, when a person merges too much with another and forgets their own identity. For a man, this usually happens not through confrontation, but through gradual self-erasure. You become who she wants, not who you are. Jung warned that when a man is cut off from his instincts, from his direction, he becomes depressed, anxious, and resentful. Because at his core, he knows something vital has been lost. And worse, he gave it away willingly, not out of strength, but out of fear. Fear of conflict, fear of being alone, fear of not being enough. This dynamic breeds imbalance, because no matter how much you give, it's never enough to make her respect you if you've abandoned your edge. And deep down, she knows it too. She might not say it, but the shift is palpable. What drew her to you, the clarity, the fire, the direction, is gone. And what's left is a man trying to please someone who no longer feels the pull she once did. The hard truth: you can't sacrifice your backbone for affection and expect to be admired. Jung knew that relationships built on submission rather than authenticity are destined to implode. Because no woman can truly love a man who doesn't love his own mission more than her approval. You are not meant to orbit someone else's life. You're meant to lead your own. Carl Jung believed that one of the most dangerous psychological traps a man can fall into is unconsciously swapping his identity to fit someone else's desires. It starts subtly. You compromise once, then twice. Before you know it, your ambitions are smaller, your voice is quieter, and your purpose has been replaced by what you think she wants. You stop lifting the heavy weight in the gym because she jokes about how obsessed you are with your body. You don't speak up about your goals because she calls them unrealistic. You start dressing, speaking, and moving in a way that seeks her approval instead of expressing your essence. And while she might not even ask for these changes directly, the message is loud and clear. Be less of you, so she can be more comfortable. Jung warned that this slow erosion of the self is a form of psychic death. When a man abandons his core identity to maintain harmony, to avoid conflict, or to hold on to someone, he trades his soul for temporary validation. But no matter how much you shrink, no matter how agreeable you become, it's never enough. Because deep down, the person who demands your transformation will start to resent the version of you they created. The irony is brutal. You change everything for her, and then she loses respect for you. Because strength, direction, and purpose aren't optional traits. They're the foundation of male vitality. When you give them up, the relationship begins to rot from the inside. And this is where many men collapse. They wake up years later, confused, resentful, disconnected from their own power, and unsure how they lost it in the first place. True connection requires wholeness, not compliance. If you have to become someone else to be loved, you were never loved. You were used. Start asking yourself this: what parts of me have I silenced to avoid upsetting her? And what would happen if I brought those parts back to life? When a man gives up his sense of self for the sake of a relationship, something dies inside him. And most don't even realize it until they're standing in the wreckage of their own purpose. Carl Jung warned that when a man's identity is reshaped entirely by the expectations of another, he loses touch with his own inner compass. And here's the hard truth: it doesn't happen all at once. It's gradual. It's subtle. And that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. It starts with small sacrifices. You stop doing the things that once lit a fire in you because she doesn't like them. You change how you speak, how you dress, how you carry yourself, just to keep the peace. You shrink in certain rooms because your strength makes her uncomfortable. And with every compromise, you get further from the man you used to be, the man you were before you met her, the man you're supposed to be. Jung believed that the psyche rebels when we abandon the process of individuation, our journey toward becoming a whole and authentic self. And when that rebellion is suppressed, it turns into resentment, anxiety, even depression. The soul knows when it's being silenced. It knows when the mask you're wearing isn't yours. Many women, consciously or not, don't want a strong man. They want a compliant one who bends, one who adjusts, one who follows. And if you don't recognize the difference early on, you'll wake up one day and realize you're no longer living your life. You're just playing a part in hers. This is not about blame. It's about awareness. You were not born to mold yourself to fit someone else's ideal. You were born to build something that reflects your truth. The moment you abandon that truth is the moment you begin to rot from the inside out. Real strength isn't found in how much you can tolerate. It's found in how firmly you can stand without needing to be liked, understood, or accepted. It's found in choosing your path, even if you have to walk it alone. There's a particular kind of silence that haunts a man who's given up too much. It's not the silence of peace. It's the silence of absence. You stop hearing your own voice. Your opinions start to feel foreign. Your confidence, once steady and calm, turns into a quiet hum of uncertainty. That's what happens when you live too long trying to be what someone else wants. Carl Jung emphasized that when a man suppresses his true nature, he doesn't become enlightened. He becomes fragmented. He spoke of the shadow, the repressed side of the psyche where all our unexpressed desires, fears, and truths are stored. And when you betray yourself to keep the peace in a relationship, you feed the shadow until it grows uncontrollably. It doesn't disappear, it waits. Until one day it breaks loose. That eruption might look like anger, or emotional detachment, or reckless behavior that even you can't explain. But it's not random. It's a cry from the parts of you that you've buried under years of pretending, under years of saying yes when you wanted to scream no. When you change everything for her, you don't just risk losing her, you risk losing yourself. You risk waking up one day and realizing the fire in your chest has turned to smoke. that the man in the mirror is obedient but empty, that all the strength you once carried has been chipped away by 1,000 small concessions. And when that moment comes, when you finally feel the weight of what you've given up, it's already too late to go back unchanged. That's the price of self-abandonment. It costs more than you think, and it takes longer than you expect to recover from. The danger isn't in compromise. It's in erosion, the slow decay of the man you were meant to be, sacrificed on the altar of someone else's comfort. True love doesn't demand that you dissolve. It demands that you evolve. But evolution requires boundaries. It requires presence. And above all, it requires the courage to remain yourself, even when that self isn't what she wants. Some men don't change for a woman. They morph. They rewrite their principles, shrink their ambitions, silence their opinions. Not because they're weak, but because they're afraid. Afraid of conflict, of abandonment, of being seen as too much. They convince themselves it's growth. But what they're really doing is making themselves more palatable, more manageable, more forgettable. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He wrote about the danger of ignoring the self to serve the persona, the image we project to gain acceptance. When a man changes everything for her, he isn't transforming. He's amputating, trimming the parts that are too rough, too honest, too independent. But the self never forgets what's been cut off. And that buried part? It doesn't die. It turns bitter. This bitterness shows up subtly. A dull resentment when she's around. An exhaustion that can't be explained. A loss of vitality, of fire, of direction. The man she fell for fades. And what remains is a version of him that's easier to control, but harder to respect. It's the paradox. The more you change to keep her, the more she feels what's missing. A man's power isn't in his obedience. It's in his integrity. You can compromise habits, but not values. You can grow together, but not if you're shrinking to fit her narrative. The moment you abandon your truth to keep peace, you invite chaos, not just in the relationship, but in your own psyche. Because Jung's warning still echoes. Whatever you repress doesn't disappear. It waits. Now comes the most brutal truth of all, and it's the one most men refuse to face. Once you've changed everything for her, your values, your routines, your ambitions, your boundaries, you're not just weaker in her eyes. You're no longer you. And it's not her fault. She didn't steal your soul. You handed it over piece by piece, thinking it would buy you closeness, thinking it would prove your love, thinking it would make you enough. But it never does. Carl Jung called this the betrayal of the self. When you abandon your inner core to become what another person wants, you fall into what Jung described as a psychic collapse. You lose the dialogue with your own unconscious. You silence your instincts, your vision, your strength. And without that internal compass, you become lost. And here's the final cut. No one respects a man who abandons himself. Not her, not you, not anyone. What she wanted wasn't control, it was presence. Polarity. A man who knows who he is and doesn't fold under pressure. When you dissolve yourself into her needs, you erase the very presence she was drawn to. What you thought would bring her closer only creates distance, not because she's cruel, but because instinctively, biologically, even spiritually, respect dies when strength disappears. So what now? Now you rebuild. You stop making others your mirror. You stop asking who you need to be to earn love, and start asking who you must become to be whole. You return to your discipline, your solitude, your vision. You face the uncomfortable truth that your purpose comes before any relationship. Because without purpose, there's no spine, no magnetism, no man. And when you walk that path, you'll draw others in, not because you need them, but because you've become immovable. That's what Jung meant by integration. That's how you reclaim your power, not through anger, not through manipulation, but through alignment. So ask yourself, are you willing to walk away from anything that asks you to shrink? Are you willing to disappoint others before you betray yourself? That's the question. And your answer shapes everything that follows.